pedagogy as in Renaissance pedagogy, but also in how Shakespeare's works can be taught in the classroom today, and as well as her experience in this field, he's had lesson plans published on the Poacher website. And today, Scott's speaking on the search for the perfect truth, education, and the Elizabethan ideal woman, and why Shakespearean men don't want her.
Hello. Most of my experience is secondary classroom based, and I'm about as green a graduate student as you can get, so bear with me a little bit. One of the main reasons that my interest kind of lies in this area is I distinctly remember early in my high school teaching career, I got the assignment to teach 10th grade, and I was told I had to teach Julius Caesar, and I asked, is that the only play I can teach? And they said yes. And I asked them why, and the response was, it's short and boys like it because people die. That was the justification for selecting a play for teaching throughout the entire county, and I thought, that's a pretty dumb reason. And the paper I'm going to deliver today is going to deal similarly with the opposite end of that spectrum, why a play is frequently excluded, at least in American high schools, and that's the Taming of the Shrew, which is one of the few plays that many school teachers seem actually afraid to teach. Harvard professor Marvin Crims has argued that modern audiences end up, quote, troubled by conflicting emotional responses to the play, and he believes that this conflict is due to the very fact that we did enjoy a play that leans heavily on representations of cruelty for its comedic effect. This conflict is at the heart of the fear of teaching Shrew. Bianca's passive, to quote an earlier speaker from yesterday, blow-up doll personality, Petruchio's perceived misogynistic rampage, and Kate's shocking change in personality all combine to unsettle modern audiences. Recent scholarship, however, has presented Shrew in a different light. When read through the lenses of Renaissance pedagogy and symbolic iconography, it becomes clear that The Taming of the Shrew is an ideal play for the secondary classroom. Petruchio presents the largest conflict in teaching the play. The apparent tamer has been accused of being a misogynistic, abusive, potential rapist, largely due to the rope tricks line in Act 1. Wayne Redhorn explained this line away as being a likely reference to rope right or rope rhetoric, which are terms which refer to pejorative adjectives for the use of extravagant language, and inkhorn terms rather than plain speech. While Redhorn may absolve Petruchio of the literary rape charges, there is still the matter of his odd behavior, starvation, and sleep deprivation. These acts can be explained through the work of J. Haleo and Helga Ramsey-Kurz. Ramsey-Kurz, whose intriguing reading views Kate as an actress without a company before her marriage to Petruchio, argues that the taming involved was more like the humane falconry taming than the brutal taming methods of the bear baiting pits. Quote, emphasizing Petruchio's brutality, such interpretations routinely ignore that the manning methods applied in falconry were devised in the interest of the bird to reduce the stress of captivity, protect the raptor from self-injury, and, most importantly, to preserve its predatory instincts. She believed that Petruchio wanted to help Kate to be happy while also keeping her volatile nature. Dr. J. Haleo, in a 2008 lecture at the Folger Shakespeare Library, argued that Petruchio doesn't actually even tame Kate, but rather unmasks her. Haleo posited that the Kate scene at the end of the play represents her true personality, and that Petruchio's taming was a means to reveal that personality. Haleo argues that Kate's true personality was overpowered by her defensive response to the perpetual insults of her family and her sister's suitors. Petruchio's actions, which he significantly does with Kate as much as to her, he also refrains from eating, and to keep Kate awake, he also refrains from sleeping, served to separate his new bride from the unhealthy surroundings of her youth. Both Haleo and Ramsey-Kurz established that Petruchio's motives have the best interests of Kate in mind, which does not fit with the interpretation of Petruchio as evil incarnate that is all too often accepted as the canonical interpretation of the character. Patricia Parker, in a 2007 article, addresses the concern about Bianca being held up as a model of submissive femininity. Parker makes a strong case that Bianca is actually the most shrewish character in the play. She focuses on Bianca's tutoring scene with her disguised masters, arguing that this scene invalidates what the audience has been told about Bianca's demure, submissive character. Parker writes that Bianca becomes master of both of her potential masters in this pivotal scene, and finally emerges as an anything but tamed wife by the play's post-marital end. Bianca's tutoring features wholly inappropriate reading material. Lucentio reads to her from Ovid's Herodes, specifically a short section from Penelope's letter to Ulysses, and in a later tutoring session in Act 4, Lucentio reads from Ovid's The Art of Love. Both of these passages would have been scandalous for use in the teaching of a young woman. Bianca not only encourages Lucentio on both occasions, But when learning that Lucentio planned to read from The Art of Love, mischievously says to him, may you prove, sir, the master of your art, showing, as we heard earlier in the plenary speaking session, that she was actually more familiar with the text than her courtier is, or was. Parker seems to view Bianca and Kate as sisters in shrewery. She argues that Kate is the designated shrew, but that Bianca is also a shrew due to her very forward behavior and assuming a controlling role of her tutoring sessions. Parker's theory is borne out in many cinematic and theatrical performances, specifically when Kate, at the crux of her transformational speech, winks at her sister conspiratorially to signify that she's playing along and is just as shrew as she's ever. This interpretation fits neither the plot nor the established characters. Kate would not share a conspiratorial wink with her hated sister. There is another possible solution to the Kate problem that so traumatizes school teachers and, as I learned last year when I first tried to teach shrew, their students. You don't want to teach this play if you have any 12th grade budding feminists in your classroom without addressing some of these issues. They get very, very mad and they assume that you are Petruchio. Not fun. Kate is not a shrew who reforms, but rather, like Dr. Haley suggested, a virtuous woman who is given the freedom to express herself. I would go so far as to argue that, when read through the lens of Renaissance pedagogical theory, Kate is far more representative of the Elizabethan ideal woman than of a shrew. Elizabethans rarely agreed upon the definition of ideal womanhood. This lack of agreement created a contentious debate around the education of women. Many favored the total lack of education, save for what was necessary for religious duty. Ruth Kelso, in her landmark gender study, Doctrine for the Lady of the Renaissance, quotes Salter's translation of Bruto to reveal the popular mindset. For women, Bruto concludes, fame and honor are not dependent upon learning. History, both ancient and modern, is full of the noble deeds done by rare and excellent ladies, famous for their courage and chastity and without ring. Some educational theorists were in favor of the education of women, though it's clear that this group was a distinct minority. Richard Mulcaster's Positions, an instruction guide for the education of Shakespeare's generation of children, dedicated an entire chapter to the education of girls and women. He begins that chapter with an acknowledgement that he knew that it was an outlandish idea to include women in a book of education. Even Mulcaster set clearly defined limits and was quick to state that educating women did not mean giving them the same education that one would give a man. He argued that a woman should be educated according to rank and eventual profession, mostly concerned with the arts of marriage and progeny. Mulcaster wrote that the instruction of reading should be limited to, quote, religion to read that which they must know. For the more skillful woman reader, he broadens the possible library to include some comfortable and wife discourses penned either in the form of history or for the direction to live by. The prevailing opinion of the time, Mulcaster concluded, was that women should read religious and moral texts, and that they should particularly avoid reading the classic Greek and Latin literature due to the idea that those works propose morality issues with the female sex. The books that were recommended were often books on the purity of women and Christian poets. Books by Ovid, Homer, Virgil, etc. were not to be considered. The near-universal ban on classical texts was largely due to the overarching desire for the ideal woman to carefully maintain her chastity. It was thought that classical texts about war or love would be far too tempting to a young woman. Juan Luis Vives, an educator whose writings enjoyed widespread circulation in Shakespeare's London, argued that, quote, a young woman cannot easily be of chaste mind if her thoughts are occupied with the sword and sinewy muscles and virile strength. Makes you wonder what he had his mind on, but I digress. He concludes by saying, what room do these thoughts leave for chastity? This emphasis on chastity was the one key area where the pro-education and anti-education camps agreed. Both sides resolved that, regardless of the skills, beauty, education, or charm possessed by a woman, her chastity was the most, and some argued only, important trait in determining whether or not a woman fit the model of the ideal. Accomplishment in arms or letters, and some women have been seen to even excel men in such unwanted exercises, can add to a woman's honor, but without chastity there is no honor possible for her, and with it there is honor, though all else be lacking. This quotation from Kelso's book. These dual ideas of